Joining us, and I'll hand it to Philip.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I guess I will kick it off. My name is Philip von Doetinchem from the University of Hawaii, and in one slide, I will introduce the team a bit more. And we're trying to present the case for increasing STEM education for older adults, something that is typically overlooked. And I want to tell you a little bit about the team that is presented here. Glennis cannot join us, unfortunately. She had something come up last minute, I think. So what you see here, kind of myself, Paul Mantsch, and Glennis Farah, we started talking in some other context because we were all physicists in the field of, let's say, particle astrophysics, and we kind of randomly figured out that this is a topic that we're all interested in, and it happens to be that my wife Sandra here on the left is an expert on older adult education, and so then we started to form kind of a little informal interest group, and we had met at this point for about a year or so, and discussed what could be done, what are the objectives, and what is the real problem here, kind of the outcome of these discussions from the last year, and also lots of the research that Sandra had done before will be kind of summarized here a little bit, and we're trying to make the case for increasing STEM education for older adults, and try to point out that it has been typically overlooked a little bit. I was actually surprised to see that already 40% of this audience have engaged with older adults. I think that is more than I would typically expect. So, but obviously, it's a bit maybe self-selected. If you advertise a talk in this direction, that people who have already done something in this field come to the talk. But mostly, what I want to say is we want to present what we have done over the last year, but we are mostly interested in getting your feedback, what are your thoughts about this kind of field that is hopefully emerging and should develop more over the next years, and what can be done for the future. So with that being said, Sandra will take over for the first part, and then myself and Paul will return later in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you for setting the stage on what we're going to discuss here. And hello, everyone. It's very nice meeting you all, and thank you again for allowing us this opportunity here today to share a little bit about the research and the work that we did as a group over the last year, as Philip mentioned. So yeah, once again, my name is Sandra von Doetinchem. Similar to Philip, I'm also at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and as Philip said, my specialty area is in older adult education and continuing education of adults. So talking a little bit about why that topic is important. You probably have heard about the term of the demographic change, which basically means that our society is aging. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So because of advancements in hygiene, advancements in medicine, healthcare, those kind of things, we see a shrinking mortality. So fewer people die, we see increasing life expectancy. And also at the same time, because of increased educational level, especially for women, use of contraceptive use, decreasing fertility levels. So fewer children are being born. So we live longer, but we also have fewer children. So that makes those kind of all developments have led to an increase in the median age, which you can see here in comparison between the 1950s and the 1950s in the US very well. So in the 1950s, we had here on the left-hand side of the pole, the upper one, we have more like a pyramid structure of the population. So it's divided by gender. The red side is the female population, the right-hand side, the male population. And yeah, once again, it's more like a pyramid shape. The broad base are children here. Children age 0 to about 10. And then with only a small tip of older adults over the age of 65, especially. So 100 years later, our population changed into some sort will change into some sort a mushroom shape. So the majority of people here will be in the middle kind of age group between the age of about 35 to 60. So as a result, of course, the median age here increased, and it will continue to increase over the years. Those kind of developments have a lot of implications on our society. Of course, when we have more older adults and fewer younger individuals coming in, we will have a shortage in the labor supply. That again will lead to a decline in economic growth. We will have fewer people to pay for example, retirement costs, healthcare costs, which will make then healthcare cost and retirement cost increase. And then there's also a lack of adequate welfare systems because of increased costs that are available and fewer people available to provide those kind of services. So lots of implications, but there's also possibilities. So while it sounds difficult to have an impact on these kind of things, there's also possibilities. In that kind of regard, the older adult workforce will get important. In general, longevity and growing financial insecurities over the last years have already pushed individuals to need or to want to work longer. So increased educational levels, for example, people say, you know, at the age of 65, I don't want to retire, I want to continue in my work. And then again, there's also individuals for a financial reason need to stay longer in the workforce than they anticipated or liked. So the trends that we see is a general kind of later retirement, increased labor force participation and volunteerism of older adults. And there's also increasing educational levels of older adults. So more and more older adults at this point already come back to higher education to obtain a degree, even at the age of over 65. So for example, here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, we recently had a graduate who was in his 90s who completed a bachelor's degree. So those kind of students are getting more and more common at universities. So the non-traditional adults are coming to higher education. And because of those kind of reasons, we think that older adults can help counterbalance the labor shortage, either through paid kind of work or also on a volunteer kind of basis. But of course, if older adults come into the workforce or continue into the workforce, it is crucial that lifelong learning and continuous training has become a necessity. So to keep up with, for example, technology demands, changes in the workforce. So all of that makes lifelong learning and training a necessity. Important in that kind of regard to keep in mind when we think about learning, we often think about K-12 or higher education. But learning is a lifelong progress. So even as the name lifelong learning says, it's a life encompassing thing. So we learn our entire life. So however, at the same time, we see some changes of the brain and the mind and as we age. So for example, short-term memory is subject to a age-related decline. Short-term memory is decreasing capacity. There's a reduced processing speed. The long-term memory at the other side stays relatively stable. So remembering things that took place for quite a while ago. So the short-term memory is just the immediate kind of things that you learned versus long-term memory, for example, what you learned a day ago or a year ago or something like that. Of course, memory is influenced by different kind of things. So for example, health has an impact on memorization and cognitive abilities. The educational background, social class, nutrition, motivation, and the condition of the sensory system. So how hearing is, for example, has a significant impact on memory and cognitive ability. So people with hearing loss tend to age faster than individuals without a hearing loss in terms of cognitive abilities. Positive impact on the other side has exercise, food that is rich in nutrition, emotional well-being, restorative sleep, and also cognitive training. But although learning speed declines, it is important to keep in mind that people still experience learning throughout their lives. And of course, in that kind of regard, I have to say that, for example, people with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, in that kind of regard, the learning gains are slightly different, but still learning to some extent is still possible. lifelong learning also has a lot of health and well-being benefits. So research has shown, for example, that in general, learning keeps the brain active, which is a no-brainer, I would say, but still that was also verified by research. It helps to adapt to change and stay up to date, has a positive impact on health, well-being, and independence. It also has a positive impact on self-esteem, social attitudes. It can prevent isolation through social integration and social group membership. So being together with a group of learners can positively influence health. Philip, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, sure. So now on this slide, we're summarizing what is currently already available. So a number of lifelong learning providers already exists that target the older adult population. So one prominent example are, for example, the Lifelong Learning Institute or OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute that are typically somewhat coupled to universities. Universities also provide guest auditing programs. Then OASIS is another organization that provides adult education, museums, theaters, or faith-based institutions, adult schools, health providers, and senior and community centers all offer lifelong learning to the older population to some degree. However, what is interesting in this regard is that these offerings don't really reach like the whole population. So obviously, like it's a bit difficult to stereotype like the older learner. There are always exceptions to the rule, but statistically speaking, the typical participant is a woman in the age of 65 to 80, coming already from advanced educational background, thinking about like the retired teacher, relatively healthy and mobile, tech savvy, and I think typically also of white ethnicity. So we're lacking, we're not representing the whole population here in the typical participant structure. So that is like one of the challenges, like how do we reach the whole population? Then like, and this is like why it is maybe a topic that is also related to the APS. The topics that are being offered are obviously sometimes from the STEM field, but mostly not. So it's mostly like arts and humanities, languages that are being offered, and STEM courses are not the norm. So, and generally speaking, lifelong learning in old age, how people learn, how to reach the population is an under-researched area. Like some efforts here and there kind of scattered around the globe do exist, but it's not enough to fully understand like what we're dealing with. Like what is very interesting to keep in mind with the older learner is compared to maybe the elementary school kid, that like this group of people is like much more diverse in terms of like their background, what they learned before in their life. They already like lived for 65 years, and so you're not any longer dealing like with just like it's much harder to say like, oh, everybody at this age is a certain way. Okay, could you please go to the next slide? Okay, so coming back a little bit to summarize the potential benefits for increasing STEM education, I think like that it can be grouped into like two different main categories. So there are like the benefits for the older learner themselves, and there is the benefits for society. And obviously, like this list might not be an entirely complete here, but like what we in our discussions found, like it's like for the individual, like train cognitive functions. It helps to like maybe stay up to date with like technological and scientific advancements. Really trying, like if you say like all of a sudden like you turn 65 and there's like a whole kind of like another generation of like years to live, like something like 30 years. So you cannot just say, oh yeah, right, I my part in the I worked, and now for the next 30 years, I don't just follow whatever technological advancement exists, and you just lose a part of society, I would say. And then also looking back, now it's becoming more and more normal that people do get college degrees, which might have not been possible 30 or 40 years for a large group of people, and maybe you just want to make up for something that you couldn't learn when you were younger. And then the benefits for society is we have it is, I think, hopefully clear that is a benefit, that it's good to increase the overall educational level of the population. And I think if you have a more educated population that maybe even to some degree can apply a scientific method, I think that will lead to more informed voters that can then make good decisions for our country, helping to reduce misinformation spread, maybe identify, learn how to identify what is misinformation, what is real information. As Sandra pointed out before, there are studies, maybe not so much from the educational side, but it has been shown that the public health level increases if you train your brain constantly throughout life. For example, pushing back the onset of dementia. And if you have a healthier population, the demands on the retirement systems will go down. And if you have a well-educated older population, they can be part of the labor shortage and counterbalance the lack of young people coming up. Okay. So talking a little bit about learning in older adulthood, and I mentioned a few of these things already before. The older learner in the classroom is different than your incoming college kid in many different ways. So all of them, or most of them, not to generalize too much, come in with some sort of professional knowledge from some sort of a professional background, and everything that they now learn on top of it is based on what they had learned before. So, which is maybe in most cases an advantage, but maybe it's also a disadvantage if somebody has opinions that you have to break down with providing them new education. Then the older learner also learns much more through interactions with others, and the learning style that might be also more related to what the older learner experienced when they were in high school or in college when they were younger. So what might work well with the 20-year-old college population these days might not be the best way of teaching an older adult. So, and also maybe from personal experience working with older adults in the classroom, what I found is that older adults are much more outspoken. They ask more questions. They're less shy than younger students, and I think in working with older adults, you have to factor this. If you're not used to this group of students, you have to factor that into how you present material. So, next slide. I think Paul, you want to take over to present your experience?
Sure, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. What we thought we would do is show an example of what one possibility for engaging seniors. As Philip points out, I would like to emphasize the fact that the senior community is more civically active. As he pointed out, the group beyond 50 actually vote much more often than the younger group. So they're an important element in our society. Well, anyway, so what we did, first of all, this is called the Lifelong Learner Institute, actually. They're all over the country, all over the US. Some of them are supported by a group called the Osher Institute. So it's sometimes called Osher Lifelong Learners. In any case, the objective is the same: to communicate science, interest in science, to the older community. So this is an example of what one of my colleagues, Mike Albro, and I did over the past few years. And I'd like to just tell you a little of our experience. And what I would really like is to hear back from those of you who are listening of your own experience, because we're all learning in this business. I think it's an important thing to do. And what we find is that the people that show up at these things, well, first of all, our Lifelong Learners Institute is sponsored by our local community college. And we hosted it at Fermilab. Now, the first few years, we were able to actually have it at Fermilab because before COVID, but since that time, it's been on Zoom. But we hope someday to get back to Fermilab because people like to come to Fermilab and see what's going on there. So anyway, so the people that show up are typically retired professionals. Like, well, not many of them, let's put it that way. We have a whole variety of people that show up, but many of them are retired teachers and engineers and professional people of various kinds. And they're all very interested in learning. There's the discussions are amazingly diverse about their attitudes and their questions. So we found this very successful. Now, if you look at these topics, they're a little heavy, but you know, if you go slowly, got to remember that seniors don't move quite as fast as the rest of the population. So you have to speak slowly, and you have to, the other thing is you have to relate the science to something in their lives, like medical advances, MRI, things like that you get their attention that way. So anyway, we've learned some lessons like that. But these courses, we have a limit on the number of people that can attend these courses, and it's always been saturated. And the response has been very, very positive. Some of them say, well, you know, I didn't understand everything, but you know, you really changed my horizon. And I think that's an important feature here. So anyway, I think people basically want to learn about science, and I think it's our obligation to make sure that they understand what science is and how it affects our lives, and also the curiosity aspect, which is an important part. So anyway, that's our experience. And again, I would like to hear back any feedback any of you might have on dealing with the senior community. That's all.
Philip, would you like to take the last slide?
Yeah, I can, sure. So we to kind of like end our like kind of, I don't know, more formal presentation here, we would like to conclude with 3 different types of suggestions. So grouped into research, we think that the lifelong learning research efforts concerning like implementing STEM education need to be researched more, and we have to understand like what an effective implementation is to reach the whole population. Generally speaking, the offerings that already exist are definitely commendable, but we have to work on like including more STEM topics within the offerings that we already have. And then maybe also related to what I said, and the first point is like the diversity of the people who are participating in these efforts need to be increased to include all different kinds of groups of the population. For example, people who had like no college training before and who are maybe a little shy to like go back to college to an OLLI, thinking, oh, this might be over my head. So, and that kind of reaching out to the older population becomes also a bit more of like a typical outreach effort, because typically outreach, I think, is like people might think like, okay, you go to to the schools or to college kids, but like also including the older adults, I think is an important aspect. On the right side of the slide, we would like to advertise some things that we're planning for later this summer. So for August 11, we're planning an online workshop. We want to bring together experts from different subfields to discuss all of this in more detail. Like we're still like working on the exact structure, and it maybe like for 3 or 4 hour half-day kind of thing that works from, well, we're in the Hawaii time zone, so for us it's always a little difficult to participate something on the East Coast. So to maybe like just for a half day to get together and discuss it from not only like the research or like the kind of like college perspective, but maybe also to get some politicians involved to see like what could be really done to scale up these efforts. So this QR code here should generate a link to a mailing list that we want to generate. Like in the please sign up for this mailing list if you would like to be included like in information about this workshop. It could be you're just generally interested in participating, or if you're even interested in providing a presentation to the workshop, we would be very interested to have you on that list. And I think that concludes our presentation.